Today, class, we are going to be writing real-world linear functions. We want to make sure that we write our function in the form of y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept, also known as slope-intercept form. You have 6 problems on this paper, 3 on the front and 3 on the back, and we're going to start with number 2 as kind of our example. So before we can complete this table and answer these 6 questions, then we need to read the problem and see what information it gives us. The problem states the action team is selling popcorn to raise money for an end-of-year picnic. After selling 30 bags, they've made a profit of $15. So we're already given information that we can highlight, circle, or underline. They sold 30 bags and they've made a profit of $15. Then we're told after selling 48 bags, they've made a profit of $42. So I can go back and I can highlight that as well. So the action team has sold 48 bags of popcorn and they've made a profit of $42. And we want to complete the table and then find the equation that models the situation. In our table, we know that this is x and this is y. So the top part of the table, when it is horizontal like this, is x, and the bottom part of the table is y. When it is vertical, the left side is x and the right side is y. To know what x and y represents, we have to think about an independent and a dependent quantity. So our independent quantity is kind of what happens first or what should come first. And in order for us to make any kind of profit, we need to first sell bags of popcorn. So we could say that x represents the number of bags, or if I could spell, the number of bags, and then we can say y represents our profit, the total profit. And once you know what x and y represents, we have to fill out the table with the information that's given in the problem. So we have 30 bags of popcorn resulted in a profit of $15, and then 15 bags of popcorn, or actually 48 bags of popcorn resulted in a profit of $42. And right now we don't really need this part filled out because we're going to get that from question D and question E. So then we can look at finding or calculating the slope. Hopefully you are now getting more comfortable with slope. We know that the slope is the change in y divided by the change in x. And so those of you who are still struggling with finding the slope, trying to figure out how much it changes by if we're going from 15 to 42 or from 30 to 48, I know that this change here is going to be the second number, which is 42, minus the first number. So my change in y is going to be the second number, 42, minus the first number, 15. And then my change in x is going to be the same, the second number, which is 48, minus the first number, which is 30. And then we can calculate what that represents. So if we go to our calculator and we figure out, well, first make sure everything is cleared out. So home, new document, no, I don't want to save it, and then add a calculator. So we want to find the change in y. That was the second number, 42, minus the first number, 15, and we get 27. So this is plus 27. And this will be also 27 over here in my numerator. And we go back to our calculator and we find the change in x. So 48 minus 30. So we get 18. So we can go back and this is plus 18. But I can write that down here. And then we want to divide those two numbers. So let's go back. Let's do 27 divided by 18, and we get 3/2. Let's say we want to represent this as a decimal answer. So we can do menu number and then convert to a decimal. That's one choice. Or hit escape. We can do control and then equals, and then that'll give me the decimal answer a lot quicker. So control and equals. So if we go back, we can say our slope is 1.5. Now, if I want to find the y-intercept, because in my table, we don't have something that says a 0 here and then another number. Remember, the y-intercept is when the x value is 0. So we can find the y-intercept using the equation of slope-intercept form. I know that the equation for slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. Well, we know what m is. We just found it. It was 1.5. And then we're trying to find the b because that's my y-intercept. And so we really just need to know what x and y is. And we do because we have 2 points in our table. So we can really use any of those 2 points. Let's say we use the first point, which is 30 and 15. So the y value is 15. So I can replace this with the 15 equals my m is my slope, so 1.5, and then my x is 30, so 30, and then plus b, and then we can just solve this for b. So you could use insolve here, or you could solve it by hand. You can do whatever you need to do to get the value here. Let's say we were going to use insolve, because some of us do need to continue practicing that. So let's go back. We can do menu, algebra, and the numerical solve, and we just type in what we had. So 15 equals 1.5 times 30 plus b. 15 equals 1.5 times 30 plus, and then the letter b. And we have to tell it what to solve for, so we're solving for b, comma b. Enter. So the y-intercept is negative 30. So if I go back, we get the y-intercept was negative 30. And I'm going to go ahead and circle my slope. So question C is now asking me for what does the slope represent? So in other words, what is the meaning of the slope? And to understand that, we have to remember that slope is the change in y over the change in x. So y represented the total profit. So I can say this would be the change in the profit. So I'm going to say profit divided by the change in x. Well, that was the number of bags. So this would be my bags. And essentially, this is the profit, so my y values, the profit per bag. And if I had to put a unit for this, well, we said 1.5, so since we're talking about money, it makes more sense to say $1.50. So I put 1.50, so my slope is $1.50 profit per bag that's sold. So that's what the slope represents in the context of this problem. And now we look at D, E, and F. D and E, remember, we're going to use that to help us fill out our table. D tells us, or is asking us for how much profit, so this would be the Y value, will be made after selling 80 bags. Well, this is my X value. So this is like if I have 80 in my table, question mark, how much profit is there? And so you can do this a couple of different ways. First, we're going to need to make an equation here. And we already know our equation, we just haven't put it together yet. So I'm actually going to backtrack and I'm going to make my equation. My equation is going to be in the form of y equals mx plus b. And I'm going to use this equation to answer these two questions. The m we've already found, and that was 1.5. So I'm going to erase this because it's in my way. I can say y equals 1.5x. because the slope is 1.5. And then my B, the y-intercept, was negative 30 from down here. So I can just say minus 30. And this is now my slope-intercept form equation that I can use to answer question D and to answer question E. So now if I want to figure out how much profit will be made after selling 80 bags, well, that's something that I can either look in the calculator or I can substitute in the value of X here and evaluate it. For those of you that are more comfortable using the calculator, I'm going to show that first. So if I go back to my calculator and I need to use the graph, I'm going to go home. Again, new document. No, I don't want to save. And then add a graph. So remember, y is the same as f of x, so I can just type that here. 1.5x minus 30. Enter. Nothing showed up, which is fine. It's just not in the viewing window. And we can do one of two things. We can trace the graph. So menu, trace, and then graph trace. And so it shows my y-intercept, something that we already found. And we want to get 80 bags. So I can type in 80. So x equals 80 and enter. And so the point is 80 and 90. So when there's 80 bags sold, it's a $90 profit. So here I can put 90 in there. And if you're not liking the calculator method, then by hand, we would take y equals 1.5 times 80 minus 30. And then you would just have to evaluate this here. So 1.5 times 80 and minus 30. That's essentially the same thing. So if we were to add a little calculator here and I did 1.5 times 30, well, actually times 80 minus 30, we still get 90. So that's going to be the same. For part E, it wants to know how many bags, how many bags must the action team sell to make a profit of $300? So now we're given the Y value. So if I go back over to my table and I put 300 over here, I want to find the X value. So if I go back to my calculator, here, and I want to now find, this, when this is 300, which means I need to sell more bags. So you can either hold down this and keep moving until you see a 300 pop up there, which might take you a little while, or you can kind of estimate, here we are at 97.7 bags, which is not realistic. But if I do, let's say 150 bags, that's 195, let's say 250, well, that's 345. So that's 250 is too many bags. So maybe I would say 200 bags. Well, now we're closer. So that you can keep doing this until you arrive at the right answer. So 285, 220. So 220 bags would be a profit of $300. That may be a little easier instead of just hitting this button here to get to your answer. So 220 bags. The alternative way of doing this would be to solve it by hand. To solve this by hand, we would take our equation, y equals 1.5x minus 30. And I know that the profit is a y value. And we would do 300 equals 1.5x minus 30. You would need to use InSolve here, or you could just solve it by hand. It's a simple two-step equation. So you do whatever you feel comfortable with. I'll let you figure that part out, since we've already figured out that we need to sell 220 bags. So I can change this to 220 in order to make a profit of $300.